Welcome to Melbourne CocoaHeads, number 141 on 8th of October 2020. Good evening. I'm Luke Tupper. I'm your MC for tonight. The best way to connect with Melbourne CocoaHeads via our website has all of our contact points. And then from there, Meetup tells you about all our events. Slack is where we chat, and you can ask questions for our presenters tonight. At Melbourne CocoaHead if you want to follow us on Twitter, and hopefully you are watching us on YouTube at the moment on the Melbourne CocoaHeads channel. We've got a pretty exciting night tonight. Two presentations. We've got Matt Coles, who's going to be telling us about building native iOS apps with AWS Amplify. And then Pete Goldsmith will be melting a CI snowflake. So yeah, two fantastic talks coming up. Looking forward to both of them. Even with all of our lockdown and everything else, CocoaHeads events are still going on all around Australia at the moment. Sydney CocoaHeads have their meetup next Thursday, 6:30 till 9:30. Great way that the Sydney CocoaHeads provide some great presentations, and of course you can connect to them just the same way we do. And Melbourne CocoaHeads have two more events coming up in October. One on the 21st, our Hack Night. We'll be running that again on Discord. And on the 27th of October, our Drinks Night, which is on Zoom. Our friends at the Melbourne GDG, and it might not be obvious to you, but the GDG is the Android developers. They're not as active at the moment, but keep an eye out on their meetup page for any events they have coming up. The NS Spain is running a virtual conference, and it's going to go for 36 hours straight, which sounds pretty incredible to me, and also very tiring. They have at the moment a call for speakers. They're missing quite a few speakers in our time zone. So if you want to get a presentation out there and get a worldwide audience for it, they usually have a couple of hundred people join their conference. Obviously, normally NS Spain is people will come together, but in this case, it's all going to be run virtually. So the conference is going to be on the 19th and the 20th of November. So, and their call for speakers is closing shortly. So if you are interested in presenting at their conference, get onto their website, and the website is nsspain.com. If you want to get in contact with us, slack.melbournecocoaheads.com gets you onto the Slack channel. Jump into the meetup channel. Tonight, if you do have any questions, I'll pick out some good ones. So while the presentations by Matt and Pete are going on, ask your questions in the meetup channel, and I'll actually ask them live so that you can have your questions answered. So just so you know where you're going in Slack, the meetup channel, chat about the meetup. Volunteers, if you want to get involved in the organisation of and how CocoaHeads is run, you can present, do an MC gig, or just help out in some of the other activities we've got going on. Please join us in the volunteers channel. Jobs for all of the jobs, and if you want to speak, join in the speakers channel. Really encourage people who haven't spoken at an event like this before to jump in that channel. There's lots of people who are more than happy to mentor you. They'll help you with your slide deck and be able to get you going. So if you're nervous about doing it, it's a great way to do it. You can do it from your office or living room, and do a presentation without having to actually stand in front of people. And that way, when we get back to the real world and actually meet in person, you'll be all good for doing your presentations. Just a reminder to everyone, we have a code of conduct, and it applies equally whether it's online or in when we're together physically. So if you've been harassed, notice that someone else is in an uncomfortable situation, or you have any other concerns, please get in contact with us. We've got our Code of Conduct webpage, and you can also email codeofconduct@melbournecocoaheads.com. So this is some of the apps we've shipped this month. First, we have an app by Carlos. I won't try to pronounce Carlos's last name. I'll mangle it. But he's released his first Mac app called Spanner, and it allows you to start up a Hugo website really quickly with a simple drag and drop. Looks like a fantastic tool. I don't use Hugo much myself, but if I do, I'll pick that one out. The next one is Zach has shipped Petty 4.0. And Petty helps New South Wales drivers find petrol nearby trains and stay up to date. He's added a whole lot of widgets and some pretty cool UI stuff. So especially, hopefully we're only a month or so away from being able to drive interstate again. So anyone doing that, have a look at Petty. And finally, Dino, I think, has released his first iOS app called Mixed Color Fix. Released it onto the App Store. Allows you to identify particular colors in images. Looks like quite a good little tool. If you do have an app that you've shipped, drop some note into Slack and keep an eye out just before the next CocoaHeads meeting, and we'll make sure we get you included next month. CocoaHeads wouldn't work, especially in the physical world, but even in the virtual world, it wouldn't work without our sponsors. And we'd like to thank our gold sponsor, Itty Bitty Apps. And we also have our silver sponsors, Latitude Financial, the REA Group, and Cognizant. And we'll be moving right along with tonight's presentations. And the first one we've got is Building Native iOS Apps with AWS Amplify by Matt Coles. So we'll hand it over to Matt.
Hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm going to speak around AWS Amplify and building native iOS applications with it. So I'll hesitate first. I'll just say I work for AWS. I am a principal TAM. I work out of the Melbourne office, but I'm really passionate about iOS and I have a mobile apps background. I actually started in the Objective-C days before there was Arc around, so it was a very long time ago, but I kind of left the space, and quite recently I've come back to it, considering we've got so much happening on the AWS side with iOS. So I'll jump into it. I am a little bit new in this area, so it's be nice to me. But I've been learning very quickly to get back onto track with all of this stuff, because I'm really excited by some of the advancements in Swift UI 2.0 that I've seen, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So with that being said, what I do want to run through tonight is what is an Amplify library. So I want to take you through what Amplify is and how it works. I'm going to take you through the libraries that are available for you to use in your application today. And then I'll show you a little bit of live coding. And as I said before, don't judge me. I'm still learning here, but I'll get there in the next couple of weeks, I reckon. So going into what is an Amplify library, I guess AWS Amplify is really about connecting to a whole bunch of backend capabilities that AWS have. So AWS has roughly 200 services today, and it's really complicated to get started as a developer, especially if you're not really familiar with the cloud and it's all new to you. You don't really know where to start. So what we've done is we've broken up AWS services into categories. So it's really easy for you to understand. If you want user authentication, that's one category, and you've got Cognito as AWS service that handles that in the background, but you don't have to learn too much of it to get going. If you want storage, there's S3, for example, and we just simply call the category S3. So storage. So you can just use S3 without having to learn too much of the detail. But the really cool thing about it is, as you start to get used to interacting with it in the front end, you start to explore the back end, and you can start to dive into those services a lot more comfortably, and that those services are the right ones that you're using for your application. So I find that really, really, really cool from my point of view. And I guess Amplify has been around for a while, and it was really for JavaScript frameworks, and we had native iOS supported through a product called Mobile Hub. What we've done is we've kind of consolidated everything, and we're essentially writing support with Amplify libraries for every single major framework and language out there. So starting with JavaScript, we had support for React, React Native, Angular, Vue, Ionic, and then late last year we released support for Android and iOS through Swift. And only about a month ago, we enabled support for Flutter as well. So we're trying to make everyone happy in terms of, whatever you want to build with, we're going to support you guys and girls performing that build. But I'm in particular, my area of excitement is iOS, which is why I wanted to speak to you all today. So diving into the Amplify libraries, as I said, Amplify is a little bit newer for iOS and Android. So we have some of the capabilities in there, but we're still working on other things. And so you're going to see a lot of movement in this space. Amplify is considered generally available for iOS and Android now. So you can use it in enterprise level applications in a production state. But at the moment, we do support 6 main modules. And the first one's really data store. And what it is it's on-device persistent storage that allows you to automatically sync that data back into the cloud whenever a device is online. So it's kind of like a local database, and then you've also got the cloud database as well. And we're handling a lot of the logic that happens between the two whenever there's no internet connectivity, and then the internet suddenly connects back in. So we handle a lot of those edge cases, and we also have flexibility for you to go there as well. In terms of predictions, we've got a huge suite of machine learning services at AWS. You can basically bake your own algorithms, build your own machine learning capabilities, and you can plug that into AWS Amplify and your application that you've built. But we've also got a whole bunch of pre-baked ones, like making a prediction based off existing data. Like you could make a forecast prediction, for example, about what the weather is going to be tomorrow. You could use machine learning to work out whether it's a hot dog or not a hot dog in the application, if it's an image application and you're doing image recognition there as well. You can do real-time translation of languages. So that's pretty awesome as well. And then on the other side, we can see how users are actually interacting with your application through the analytics module. So that uses Pinpoint in the background, and that allows you to basically see events like when the user opens that particular view that you've got in your application, what were the buttons that they clicked there, what was it that they ordered. You can track all of that stuff, and then you can make some decisions on user experience from those analytics. How do we make this even smoother for users, for example? Authentication is quite cool as well. So in the native suite, we don't have like a pre-built UI. In a sense, that's done natively. So we basically provide the library, And unlike the web side of things, which come with a pre-baked UI that you can choose to use, you basically create the front end for that library, and you can access user authentication straight out of the box, and you can make it federated, and you can hook it up to like Facebook login, Google login, Apple single sign-on, all those services you can tie in very, very easily with a couple of commands. And then on the API side, we've got support for REST-based APIs, we've got support for GraphQL, and those can access other services within AWS in the back end, like Lambda. So you could have some code that happens in the back end to do a whole bunch of things that you need for your application. It's fairly flexible in that use case. Or you could even use it to access the database layer. So you've got data store, or you've also got the choice of like maybe a traditional database in the background, and you've tied that in through the API module. And on the storage side, I mentioned image, file storage, all of that happens through S3, and you can bring that really, really simply into your app. Some of the stuff that is in JavaScript as well, that's an addition that they're working on quite solidly to bring into Amplify for native, is augmented reality, pub-sub models, so you can have a messaging style application, interactions if you want chatbots brought in as well, and then the notifications module for push notifications and the likes. So those are some of the extra things that are in the JavaScript library that aren't in native today, but we've been moving really, really fast in this space, so I expect this to change quite rapidly. So I wanted to give you an example in particular. I've talked about the modules. I wanted to go through kind of like predictions, which is my favorite one at the moment in terms of using. So you've got support for your own machine learning models if you've got machine learning scientists at your work, or you just want to play around with some machine learning code that you've seen online. You can build all of that within AWS through SageMaker, and then you can bring that into the app very, very simply with a couple of commands. We have support for core ML models as well. And the reason why we've done this is sometimes devices aren't going to be able to access cloud functionality. So core ML is really, really important to do on-device processing, so you can still have a good experience if the power of the cloud's not accessible for that particular device. And then all the things that we've pre-baked, we've got image recognition, as I mentioned beforehand, comprehension, comprehend for understanding and analyzing text. We've got Poly, which is very similar to Alexa, so it's a voice-based service. We've got Textract there as well, so if you're doing OCR and things and you want to take apart a PDF and convert that to text, you can use Textract for that particular use case. Transcribe for language conversion, and also transcribe for voice to text, and then translate for language conversion. So you can see that we've got a ton here already. But what I'll do now is I will give you a live coding example. So I've got my nice little Australia slide / New Zealand, so you can see a mixture of things. I'm half, so that's why I settled on doing it this way. But I'll get into what I've built very quickly first. So let me drag off the PowerPoint, and I'll take you to the application that I've only just put together. I've done really bare bones here to show you a live example of how easy it is to plug into an app that you might have. I have basically just set up a UIKit app delegate app, and then I'm using Swift UI for the, here we go. And then I'm using Swift UI for the content view. I haven't done anything special. I've just added a VStack in a couple of different fields, so text field, a button, and some text, just because I know that we're limited on time. And then I've added in a pod file. We don't have support for Carthage yet or SPM. That's still in the works, so that's why I'm using CocoaPods. But I know there's a lot of people that are using CocoaPods as well, so it's a good starting point anyway. And this is going to be the shell that we're working with tonight. And what we're going to do in the app is we're going to bring in a translation feature, if you haven't already guessed. You might have seen user input, Japanese translation. You can see the simple start of it here. So with that being said, let us start to add Amplify into the application. So I've just gone to the AWS docs, just the getting started guide. I'm actually going to flip into libraries, and you can see all the different services that we support here in the dropdown, but I've got iOS highlighted. So everything's going to be for my particular flow with iOS, and you'll see that we support like async code and non-async and different things that you'd use natively within Swift. So we actually have code examples based on whether you're building an app for iOS 11 or 13 as well. So that's really, really cool. So the first thing is to install and configure the Amplify CLI. To do this, you'll effectively need Node and NPM on your computer. You can find links. Let me stop that. You can find links up the very top of the page that show you how to grab those if you're not too familiar. But that's effectively what we're using as the way to manage the CLI component of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that script, copy that script in, and I'm going to take it over to my terminal. And I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to run it through it. There might be an update, so I've already got it pre-installed, but there's a good chance that there's a new version out since I last did this. So running the script's a good thing anyway. So what's happening here is this will allow us to then start to add things into our application through simple commands. So I'll type like amplify add, and then I'll pick one of the services to add that particular service and that particular library to my application. So that's kind of why we use the CLI. It also allows us, once we've added something into a mobile application, great. Let's just sudo it. The other thing is, once we've added features into our application and we've started building that stuff into our application, we can run like an amplify push command. And what that does is it generates all the resources in the back end on AWS, which is really cool. And we don't have to really deal with AWS console in a sense for that. So we'll go through and install that very, very quickly. Depending on great Melbourne NBN internet. Here we go. And we're here. So the first thing that you'd run, as per the guide, is an amplify configure command. And what that will get you to do is it will get you to log into the AWS console once, just to set up a new user essentially. And hopefully I'm still logged in. Yep, that's cool. So I go back to the console, I press enter to continue, and then I choose my AWS region. So I want to use the AWS Sydney region, so it's AP Southeast 2. And I'm just going to call this, test amplify user. So I'm creating a brand new user, and it will bring me into the right view on the console to do that. It's a dummy user, so don't try and use my API keys after the session. Thank you very much. But what we want to do on the next page, and all of this is through the project setup walkthrough as well, is I want to make sure that I've got the Amplify administrator access role. Now that will let me do anything in AWS, but if you were very particular on what you wanted to use, you could say I'm using authentication with AWS, so I want access to Cognito only. So you can do really segregated rights as well, and you can find what rights are needed for what roles through the Amplify documentation too. But everything else I can simply skip through very fast and create that user. Now, I'll get given an access key at the very end. This is what I need to copy and go back into the terminal and continue. I did this this morning, actually. Not too sure why. It's because there's a space in what was copied. There we go. So I'll copy the access key and secret key from AWS into the console. There's no space there. Cool. And I will just call this test user. And now what will happen is that my laptop will be able to make calls into AWS to set up and provision things in the background. So I can simply close that tab and I can go back to the documentation. And you can see it walks through all the same stuff. So the very next thing that I need to do to get an iOS project set up with Amplify is to install the Amplify pods. So I'm going to go back to my CocoaPods file, and I am going to add it in straight under pods to translate. And I'll save that file, and I will run a pod install command, and that will download the Amplify libraries to use within my Xcode project. So that might take a little while. did make all my text large, so hopefully it's come through okay in the stream. Perfect. And it looks like we're in business. Can I see? Yeah. Cool. Yep, it looks like that's done. So that's very cool. And what I'll do next is I will then do an amplify init command on this particular folder and set up Amplify for my app itself in the background. So I'm just going to call this translate, and I'm going to leave everything as default. I'm going to choose my editor as none. It's an iOS application, of course, and just waiting for this last thing to come through, and then I'll show you. So I'm going to choose the AWS profile. I'm going to use that test user that I created beforehand that has admin access to my account. And it's going to start to provision a backend environment for Amplify. And so if I actually go back to my folder for the Translate app, you'll see a couple of new files pop in that are to do with Amplify directly. So what Amplify is doing is it's essentially going to create that cloud environment, but it's going to give me some local code that the CLI interacts with. That's basically CloudFormation, and it will allow me to basically push resources and create resources through the CLI and put them directly into cloud. So you can see it created the AWS configuration file, the Amplify configuration file, and then the Amplify folder, which is going to start to, as I add services, and start to list these services in different folders. And I can open them up in a text editor and alter them more so if I want, but I can also use the CLI to pull things together. So that's all done. Now the next thing that I need to do is I need to open up Xcode again, and I need to bring in the AWS config file and the Amplify configuration file. So I'll just add them in there. And straight after that, I will import Amplify into my app delegate. So I'll go into the app delegate and I'll add it just under UIKit. And the next thing is that we do want to have this Amplify configure action added into the did finish with launch options within the app delegate as well. So we can do a configuration on Amplify itself. So did finish with launch options, it's right here. And I'll just insert the rest of that code underneath. So once I'm done there, I've pretty much got Amplify in my application. What I want to do is I'm going to start to play with predictions. So I'm going to go to the Translate Library language module, and you can see the first thing that it asks me to do is run Amplify add predictions. So I'm going to do that in the CLI. And this is going to be, if I go back to the documentation, it's going to be convert language. So I'll pick convert. I'll say yes to Cognito. And I'll just leave all of that stuff at default. So it's going to want some authentication, but I'm going to simply translate text. I'll leave the assets as is. The source language is English. It's the only language I know. So I'm going to go with that for now. And then I'm going to choose Japanese as the target language. And I'm going to say auth and guest users. So I don't want users to authenticate. I'm not going to build an authentication view today. I'm just going to allow my guest users to interact with my app directly. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to actually build all this stuff in the cloud. So I'm going to do an amplify push command. And I'm going to start to create the prediction asset and the authentication asset directly in the cloud without having to think too much about it. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to continue here. And if I do go to the console, like I don't have to really be here in the console, but if I go into CloudFormation, this is a little secret view because it does take a while to build, but I can see that there's this translate app that's appeared. And effectively what's happening is the code from my Amplify folder for my project has been pushed up into AWS, and now AWS has been tasked with CloudFormation to build up all these resources for my application. So I haven't had to do anything myself really at the end of the day to trigger all of this. But if I go into Cognito, for example, once this CloudFormation's run, now I've just got my water tracker app there, you'll see the test app come in here for Translate. If I go into the Amplify area of AWS as well, you can see I've got Translate here as well. And so what it's doing is it's building all these assets for me without having to really worry about this as an app developer. And the other thing is you can import assets, so you don't have to, in particular, rely on setting up new assets, right? So you might have a web app as well. You can simply, in the configuration file, just point to the existing resources that you might have set up for your web version of the application, for example. So that's really, really cool. So let's go back to the CLI and see how it's tracking. So it does take a couple of minutes, but it's going to get there at the end of the day. And what I might do is I might go back to the guide and see what else we can do in the background as we wait for the CLI to finish up here. So what we'll want to do is we will want to add some code in for handling the translation. So I'll go back to my content view, and I might grab the translate text code here to get something up very quickly, and I will put it just here as a function. We are going to go to Japanese, so I'll add this in. We are going to have to import Amplify as well. So what we're going to do is we are going to just do an import Amplify. We should be in business here. I'll just make sure everything builds. And why is the latest version of Xcode defaulting to this iPod Touch? I want it to stay on the iPhone 11. I've also noticed in some of the beta builds for Big Sur, which is on my other computer, I've noticed it keeps trying to default to like the iPhone, I think it was the iPhone SE, which is just annoying. So let's just make sure this all runs. I think we're in business though. And let's just also see, awesome, our resources have been created in the cloud. So what we're going to do very quickly, because I know we've got limited time here, is I'm going to add some code in here to get everything working very quickly. So it's not just the text to convert that we're going to be working with, but there's going to be some converted text that's going to be returned. So I'll put that in as another string. And that should be good here. And what we are going to do is we are going to basically go in here and we are going to add in the converted text fields, which should be blank at the moment. And the action's going to change to be self dot, what's that thing called, translate. Translate text. Let's just go like that. And so I'll call that particular function in the code. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to change my converted text to equal the result of the conversion. So I'll go result.text. And I think we're in business. So if I am, what's gone wrong here? Let's have a look. Self.translate text to convert. Yeah, I should probably feed in. I actually don't need to feed in the string text, do I? Can do it if it really wants it. Here we go. What we'll do is we'll run the, oh no, we've got some problems. What is it? Yeah, you're right. There we go. Let's see if it builds. And if we're in luck, insert text. Let's dumb it down a little bit actually. What I'll do is I'll strip this out and I'll go text to convert because we've already got that being written to that variable. And let's give this a go. I told you guys I'm new to it. I'm still skilling up in Swift 2, but give me a couple of weeks and I reckon I'll be there. So we're going to convert some user inputs. What I'll do is I will convert, let's just think of a particular thing. We'll start with Apple iPhone event October, because that's what I'm looking forward to. And we do have an error, but that's okay. We are missing the predictions library. Let me just see what libraries we need, and then I'm pretty sure we'll have this working. So we'll go to the getting started for this, and we'll just scroll down. Yeah, there we go. So it wants us to import these 2 extra libraries. And hopefully they don't need to be in my pod file, but we'll see. Yeah, we're going to have to put them into the pod file, aren't we? Of course. So what are the pods? Let's quickly get these names down. And you always gotta love live demos as well, don't you? And hopefully this doesn't take too long. Here we go. Just wait for that install to complete and then we'll do a build again. The other cool thing that I really do like about it is that, you know, one of the things I've noticed with different SDKs is usually you get this really huge SDK that does everything, and with Amplify they've broken up into different sections. And so I did find that quite cool in the fact that it helps to reduce my app size. I can bring in only the libraries that I need for particular features. So I was quite a big fan of that actually. And it's getting there. I wonder if it's got the ones that we need to start. I wonder if I can just do a sneaky build in the background. Not yet. I'm always very impatient with this stuff. Okay, here we go. So let's try and run this again. And fingers crossed it works end to end, and then we're in business. And I'm really grateful work updated my laptop the other week, because this would be a lot slower on the old laptop. I ended up going from a very old 13-inch from like 2015 to the new 16-inch. Back in the Objective-C days, I was walk to the coffee shop and wait to see if things build. Okay, here we go. Just waiting for it to finish launching. And let's try iPhone event October. Let's try and convert that. Ah, no cigar again. That's great. Let us just have a look, see if we can work this out. I think we're still missing a library. I'll just double check. So we've got Amplify plugins, we've got Amplify, we've got the prediction plugins as well. What else do we need? There's got to be something else that's needed. I'll just see if there's anything that was missing in the app delegate. I'll just quickly check the guide again. Let's have a look very quickly. Yeah, I reckon we're going to be missing those in the app delegate as well. Maybe they're needed a bit earlier for the app. And I'll remove that one. It's duplication. And we will try again. And fingers crossed this time. Hopefully, third time lucky. Here we go. October event, Apple, iPhone 12. No, we've still got the problem. It's not too fun. Let me just have one more look over it. I'll see if it's a quick thing. And that I haven't missed anything major. Frustrating thing is I did have, so no plugins added to predictions category.swift. Why is that? I've got the predictions plugin. Oh, of course. There's some extra tries that we need to add in. This is what happens when I rush things around. I try and make time very, very quickly because I know we're always pushed for 30 minutes and then I miss a whole bunch of stuff. So it wasn't actually loading in the plugins. Okay. But that's exactly what all this is. It's always trial and error, but it is really easy. If you follow the guide, within half an hour, you can be up and running with all the stuff, which is pretty cool. And I will test pizza this time. I'll just make it quick. No, we still got errors. Oh no, we didn't. Excellent, it worked. Pizza. I was expecting more problems. Let's go iPhone 12 event. iPhone 12, and we've got Japanese. Excellent. And I'll do one more test. What am I going to do? I'm going to go with let's go with Melbourne. And there we go. I don't know if that's correct in Japanese, but it does definitely not look like English. So if anyone knows Japanese, you can verify how good the translation is. But I've been told by colleagues that it's pretty spot on. So what I'll do is I'll call it a wrap there. I know I've run over. I know I was pushing things really, really fast. But yeah, I guess I'm Melbourne-based. I'm becoming an expert in Amplify, working at AWS. I'm more than happy to talk and help out with anyone that's building applications. And I'm really starting to learn Swift again. So I'm, 8 years later, going from Objective-C to Swift. So wish me luck in that journey, and I'll be part of CocoaHeads for a fair while from now on, I reckon.
Thank you for that, Matt. You happy just to take a couple of quick questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one is from Franklin, and a big hello to all of our Ugandan viewers. He wanted to know, for the authentication, are the pre-built UI components built for Swift UI? Or is Swift UI coming?
Yeah, I'm hoping it's coming. We have feature requests that you can +1 on the Amplify GitHub page for iOS. What we've done at the moment is we've done a web view that pops in for Cognito that you can leverage. So we don't have a pre-built UI component exactly, but we push to the web and then we come back. I'm certain that we're going to see it soon, though.
Cool. And another question from a different Matt. Is the Amplify SDK the same as the older AWS SDK?
No, it's quite different. It was Mobile Hub that we used beforehand, but there were quite a few issues that we ran into with Mobile Hub and kind of matching the functionality on other platforms. So that's why we've brought everything in together with AWS Amplify. And I think if you looked at it about 2 years ago, AWS Amplify and Mobile Hub were very similar, like in the way that they've done things. But with the release in December 2019, it's basically a rewrite now to the whole library to bring parity into to what we're doing with Amplify across the board.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Matt.
No problems at all.
So we will take a brief break as we switch from Matt's presentation to then looking at Pete's presentation on melting a sea ice snowflake. Okay, and next up we have Pete Goldsmith from REA, and he details how they've built their in-house CI infrastructure using BuildKite, MacStadium, Anchor, Ansible, and a healthy dose of Dash. So big round of applause and cheers for Pete, and as he'll make his way up onto the stage and give his presentation for us tonight.
Excellent. So I'm Pete Goldsmith, and tonight I'm going to present Melting a Sea Ice Snowflake. I'm a lead mobile developer at REA. I've been there just under 2 years. Before that, I was at ASOS in London. And before that, I was at Itty Bitty Apps for nearly 5 years. So I've been around Melbourne for quite some time. At REA, my day job is looking after mobile tooling, focusing on the kind of entire organizational set of problems. So for this presentation, I'm going to run through how at REA took multiple ways of doing iOS CI and moved them to the same tooling that the rest of the organization was using and the benefits that we've been seeing. I'm going to cover what we had in the past, what we've now got, how we're using MacStadium and why we went with them, how we manage multiple Macs in MacStadium, the challenges of managing macOS build environments and why putting macOS in a box is a good thing, so that's virtualization, and how all of this hangs together in our new system. All right. So iOS tooling, or Xcode, needs to run on Macs. No Docker, no AWS, no Linux, and certainly no Windows. From this spawns all the complexity that you see time and time again in different organizations. At REA, it's been no different. We have had so many challenges in the past of iOS being the snowflake child that sits off in the corner. Even Android, doesn't have these sort of problems because Android can run on Linux and can be put in a box. At REA, we use BuildKite for the entire organization. Android is orchestrated using BuildKite. All of the backend, front end, everything is using BuildKite at REA. And REA has been using BuildKite for many years. And with such a large investment into BuildKite, we've built up expert knowledge and some really incredible internal tools and auditing and security processes that make using BuildKite just an absolute dream internal to REA. However, iOS didn't get to reap any of those benefits, couldn't tap into any of the great sides of using BuildKite. Because iOS is such a snowflake and the of trying to align anything process-wise that we're doing with iOS and Android, that friction just built up more and more over time, and iOS as a CI kind of got forgotten, and ops people would just ignore what the iOS mobile people were doing off in the corner. And yeah, we've gone through quite a few iterations at REA of holding CI. This little table that you're looking at here is kind of a snapshot of where we were before we kicked off this initiative about this time last year. We have quite a few different apps, quite a few different internal libraries and frameworks. This table is not exhaustive, but what it's trying to show here is that we had the PR builds, or the unit tests, were being run on Buddy Build for the Red app, but the App Store and archive builds were being run on laptops or Mac Minis somewhere in the building. Another app and another team had everything on a Mac Mini, another team had everything sitting on Buddy Build. And every time a new app or a team was spinning up, these sets of problems needed to be solved over and over again as to which tool that they should be using. And we were using Buddy Build quite happily until Apple bought them and then shut down the Android support, and then stopped accepting any more money to scale up. So we started to hit a point, like a real inflection point for we really wanted to solve this problem and solve it properly internally for everyone, not just for one of these teams or one of these apps. For the laptops and Mac Minis that we had floating around, one of them was a laptop that was responsible for doing the archive builds and uploading to the App Store. It occasionally got cleaned up or put away by cleaning staff. So we had to put some Post-it notes on it, but we put 2 Post-it notes on it, so there was some redundant there in case someone knocked one of the Post-it notes off. We had another team that was using a Mac Mini that we just, I asked, so I can see that you're using this particular build machine. Whereabouts is it? It's definitely not in our data center that REA is moving out of. And a lot of the members on the team didn't actually know where in the building it was. They said it's somewhere near, the tech services people. And yeah, there was a day where I needed to chase multiple people to tell me other people that actually knew where this box was physically located in the building. So yeah, that's a bit of a snapshot as to where we were. We had some laptops under desks, laptops on desks, some Mac Minis hiding in cupboards. At one stage, we had a trash can Mac Pro that was on display in our kind of tech hub area where we would let guests and clients kind of walk through. But that Mac Pro was on display, but it was actually our build server for a period of time. And yeah, we had fragmented usage of Buddy Build as well. So this time last year, we came up with a plan, and what we wanted out of the solution was that we really wanted to leverage everything that the rest of the organization was reaping benefit-wise from BuildKite. So we wanted to use BuildKite for our iOS pipelines. But doing so, we didn't want to just grab a couple of Macs and put BuildKite agents on it and force everyone onto the same tool chain, because we had such a large number of teams and different apps, and all of those had different Xcode version requirements, dependency managers, Carthage, CocoaPods. No one was using SwiftPM. There was 83.7 different versions of Ruby being used across the organization. And our task wasn't to unify everyone onto the exact same tool chain. Our task was to give our teams the autonomy and the ability to choose their CI infrastructure similar to everyone else was within the organization. So that was getting to choose their own tool chain, choose their version of Xcode. And previously we had been burnt where we had put BuildKite agent just sitting on a Mac. And that ends up with a bit of onus on the people using that infrastructure to be aware of the fact that they're running on a persistent machine. We didn't want that. And another problem that we had previously was when we were managing our own Macs was The time to new Xcode version was quite important, especially when betas are coming out fast, or when Apple gives you 24 hours to get ready to upload to the App Store. We wanted our time to new Xcode less than 1 week, and we achieved it less than 1 week. We can meet Apple's demands of 24-hour turnaround. So, like I said, using BuildKite means using self-managed Macs. For those that are not familiar with BuildKite, and I've been talking about BuildKite, it's a CI, it's a platform as a service that offers the orchestration of your pipelines, and they give you a little BuildKite agent, which just accepts your commands, and you put that BuildKite agent on a machine somewhere. Most of the time, that little machine is inside like a Docker image on AWS or some other kind of infrastructure vendor. But it's a tiny little agent that takes requests in from BuildKite Cloud and runs them on the environment that it's hosted on. So like I was saying before, we could have just purchased a handful of Macs and put them in the office, but then that spawns a whole bunch of other questions that we really didn't want to have to answer. We were moving out of our data center that REA had been in. We didn't want to rapidly start moving back into a data center. And luckily, there is a mob who specializes in offering up Macs that are in a data center that meets all of the security and uptime requirements that we were after. So that's MacStadium. And MacStadium, they rack mount consumer grade hardware. They rack mount Macs. They rack mount iMacs. 5K iMacs rack mounted are quite hilarious. I don't have any pictures of those, but here are some pictures of thousands of Mac Minis being rack mounted. And there's a Mac Pro that is a little bit pricey for us right now, but so using MacStadium, we were able to solve and get answers to all those questions. We didn't have to worry about power, the network uplink times, the no cleaner was going to come by and accidentally bump a cord or anything like that. Another great thing that we could do with MacStadium was guarantee a kind of a secure communication between REA's network, and REA's got a very, I'm not a network guru, but the internal REA network's wired up like many other enterprises, lots of different access controls. But what MacStadium offers is that we can, from MacStadium, rent a dedicated firewall appliance and have that create a direct encrypted peer connection with the REA's firewall. And through that tunnel, I can talk to the Mac Minis as though they're on the machine next to me in the office, or now that I work from home, it's kind of the same as talking to Macs over the cloud. But it's all the same internal REA access controls. So you have to be authorized onto the REA network first before you can talk to any of these Macs. These Macs can talk outwards to the greater cloud, but I should have deleted some arrows because they can't actually they can't initiate connections back in to REA's network. So that's MacStadium solving the physical infrastructure problem. Now we can kind of turn to the software on the Macs. Looking after any machine that's going to be persistent has its perils. And for build machines, for a very long time, Docker and other virtualization technologies have been solving this for everyone else. We had tried in the past, like I said, a physical Mac with Xcode installed on it and the BuildKite agent, but then that becomes a great big ball of state really quickly. If you went up to your security or ops folks and said, hey, we're going to run a CI agent process on a Linux rack server, we're going to give it elevated privileges without any containerization, and we're going to let anyone in the building run arbitrary commands on it, you're probably going to get an interesting response. So yeah, looking after an Xcode or a macOS build environment is quite tricky. And when we needed to service multiple versions of Xcode on the same machine, it can be done, but you start to hit iOS simulator stability issues when you've got multiple versions of Xcode installed, and they're all talking to the same iOS simulator core simulator service. Things start to get flaky. So what we wanted was ephemeral build environments, just like Docker. So that means getting macOS, virtualizing it, and putting it in a box. There are different technologies for doing this. VMware is one of the great virtualization vendors, and there's VirtualBox, which is open source. I think that's still by Oracle, and there's Anchor. At the time that we were looking at these different solutions, Anchor stood out for us. So on the slide here, there's a little alien. That's the Anchor logo. Anchor is a virtualization tool that focuses solely on macOS. So unlike VMware or VirtualBox that are kind of trying to solve virtualization for many different guest operating systems and host operating systems, Virtue, the company behind Anchor, they are dedicated to just solving virtualizing macOS on macOS. And having that kind of tight focus means that they can offer up a tool that's extremely fast and works with all of kind of Apple's intricacies. Also, at the time when we were evaluating different vendors, they were one of the only ones that were built on top of Apple's hypervisor framework. And what that meant was, because we wanted to use the 2018 Mac Minis, the 2018 Mac Minis have got a T2 chip, and the T2 chip is kind of the secure gateway to some of the internals of the Mac, such as the SSD. And if you were other vendor at the time, other vendors' hypervisors with their custom kernel extensions were not able to access things guarded by the T2. But as of now, I think most vendors are now offering solutions that do work on Apple's hypervisor framework. But still, I'm very happy with Anchor as a vendor who solely focuses on the kind of problem domain that we wanted solved. Anchor as a tool doesn't have any UI. It's all kind of command line. It's all command line infrastructure. And in our quick testing, we were able to get a reference VM. So we put macOS and Xcode build, Xcode inside a VM, and put that in a suspended state. We're able to clone that VM, run Xcode build within it, and tear it down within 10 seconds. I'm very happy with that. So with Mac Stadium solving our physical infrastructure problem and using Anchor to solve our virtualization and software problem, I'll now cover what our setup is, or what we ended up building. This here is a quick dashboard of that Gina from REA, who worked with me on all of this stuff that I'm presenting tonight. She built this dashboard that shows the running agents on our Macs. So we've got 8 Mac Minis at the moment in Mac Stadium, and each of them are running 3 instances of the build kite agent. So any one physical piece of metal can run 3 jobs at the same time. The 3 it started out as an arbitrary number, but it's worked out to be a decent balance trade-off of number of concurrent jobs and hardware utilization. So yeah, on this dashboard, you're seeing the yellow build kite is jobs currently being built. And yes, I will now cover how this system kind of hangs together, or how that kind of works end to end. So this is a diagram where we've got 8 Mac Minis sitting in Mac Stadium, and the cloud at the top, that's the build kite platform as a service. So if we zoom into one Mac Mini, we've got 3 build kite agents. When each of these build kite agents have got a different priority level, so that guarantees uniform utilization of the hardware. So each Mac has got a priority 1, and then a priority 2, then a priority 3. That just means that if 3 jobs come in, they're not all going to the same machine, physical machine. They get distributed across all of the hosts. So when a job comes in, it's going to be executed by one of the build kite agents on the metal machine. Build kite offers a hook that we can run a script in, and at this point in time we can kind of do some tasks before the actual request of the build job. This is the bootstrap script. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to clone a VM for the job at hand. So like I was saying before, we've got these kind of template suspended VMs, and inside of these VMs we've got Xcode already installed, Homebrew installed, Ruby, a bunch of different Ruby versions, and CocoaPods and a few other gems and command line tools. Ignore the 11.4, that's old copy and paste that I did. So we clone that for that specific build job that's come in. So that we now have a new warm running VM that is got a ID, like it's got a name that references the build ID. The next thing that we do before the job starts is we install certificates. So the VM templates that we've got floating around don't have any secrets installed. Those are deployed to the physical Macs and they get injected into the VMs after they're booted. So we run a few keychain commands and install a few other environment variables. We then pass the job from the outer metal machine inside the VM. So once that happens, the job inside, that little build kite agent that's sitting inside the VM, has no idea that it's running inside a virtual environment, and neither do the consumers of our CI. They just write in their pipeline YAML the tasks that they want to have done, and what jobs that they would like executed, or if they've got any build kite plugins that they would like to run. And that runs as though it's running in a metal machine. Once a job passes or fails, we kill it. So we kill the VM that we made just for that build, and we go back to where we started. So doing that process over and over again, every time a build occurs, we can guarantee that we've got the same immutable reference image that is used for a particular build. So making this work. Managing metal is something that was new to me. I had done previously, way back, a little bit of Linux administration when I was working for a domain name and web hosting company, but I was not really at the time in charge of looking after metal machines. For the metal machines that we've got up and running, we've got quite a few tasks or things that we need to have installed on them, or provisioned, and keeping all of them uniform and keeping all of them in the same shape and updated to the exact same tool chain is something that you don't want to write a bash script for. You don't want to SSH into each one, or you don't want to VNC or screen share into each one and try and make them all the same. There's a tool called Ansible that is dedicated to this job. Ansible excels at managing persistent mutable infrastructure, and it's got this concept of a playbook or tasks, and when it's running these tasks, it can do all of these optimizations to check if it actually needs to run a task. So you can say something like copy a file from this or location to this location, and it checks first if it's already there. If it's already there, it's not going to do the task at hand. It's got a very strong focus on idempotency, so making sure that if you run the playbook or your tasks multiple times, it's going to end up in the same state. And yeah, it was a bit of a learning curve using Ansible, but once I tried to do anything like what it was achieving in Bash or in any other scripting or tool, yeah, fell in love with it. So the host middle machines that we've got, they don't need Xcode because nothing's built directly on them. All that we, when we need to add a new metal machine, all we have to do is update an inventory file. So Ansible runs on this concept of inventory, and it's just a text file with IP addresses or host names, and we just add a new one in there, and then I run the playbook, and it will run against all of the machines, and it will make sure that they're all uniform. And provisioning a new piece of metal is quite fast. It doesn't take that long. Building VMs or installing Xcode or unpacking Xcode zips does take a long time. We went with a shape of one version of Xcode per virtual machine. So that means that for all of the versions of Xcode that our system supports, there's a different virtual machine image for each one of those. Different vendors have gone with different approaches, but what I was focusing on in this case was how quickly could we go from nothing to a VM that we could use in our infrastructure. So installing Xcode, like I said, takes a really long time, and priming the simulators takes a long time as well. So if we were to have all of our versions of Xcode in the one VM reference image, to go from nothing to that, if I had to do disaster recovery, would take a very long time. So the list of tasks, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but these are the list of tasks that we run through to go from nothing to a virtual machine image that is good to go. All of these tasks take very significant amount of time. Installing macOS from base takes 40 minutes. It's not too long, but unpacking or downloading Xcode and unpacking it, and then booting the simulators and priming them. So when I say priming the simulators, if you've installed Xcode from scratch and you've opened up the simulator for the first time, you see the Apple logo on the booting bar. That's writing out a whole bunch of files to disk and setting up that little simulators environment. We do that inside our virtual machine images. So anytime someone starts a build, they don't have to wait for that overhead. So all of this takes a really long time. And one of the ways that we cut down on this is we layer this. So we have one image that is just got the macOS installer complete in it, and that's the base image, and that kind of gets used as a reference. We then take that reference base image and we build the tools image. So that's Homebrew, Ruby, all of the versions of Ruby, all the other command line tools, and that I call the tools image. And then we go from the tools image to the Xcode image. So this is the thing that happens a lot more frequently, and especially after wwdc. That's where we take the tools image, we download Xcode into it, we unzip it, we run the command line options for first time launch, we boot the simulators, and yeah, a few other little things after that. But going from a tools image to the Xcode image takes about an hour and a half, and then to copy that image across the entire machines, across all of the machines, yeah, that total time's about an hour and a half. So our time to new Xcode is a lot less than 1 week now. So what does it look like to use this system? So if you're a iOS person at REA now, you get to write your CI pipeline just like everyone else that's using BuildKite. You specify your steps. The only thing that's slightly different is that you do specify an environment variable, the macOS VM name, and that helps us when we're bootstrapping to tell us which Xcode version or which VM image you would actually like to use. The other thing is that you specify which agent queue. So that's mobile CI in our case. And yeah, that's all you need to do to get up and running with our infrastructure. And in this example here, we've got 2 tasks. They're both running concurrently. We've got tests, and that's running on mobile CI, and we've got the archive application. So the command is what gets executed inside the VM. All of BuildKite's plugins work and are compatible with our setup. But yeah, what I'm trying to highlight here is like, yeah, it's a bit of YAML and it doesn't show a lot of value, but from where we were and the friction that each team or app had to go through to set up a new project, or Buddy Build, where all of the CI configuration was not codified, it was not in the repo itself, it was all ClickOps, it was all in a web UI. The speed for us now to grab a new project and get it onto our agents is, yeah, the friction's completely gone. So some of the benefits we're seeing, like I said, really fast to get up and running. Infrastructure as code. So previously when we had the Macs ourselves and had installed Xcode and tried to set up a CI environment, none of that was really, because we didn't have the virtualization technology. Or the virtualization technology we did have wasn't as scriptable as Anchor. We've now got infrastructure as code. So if our Mac Stadium data center got wiped away or Pete got hit by a bus, I keep walking in front of buses, but they're not that hard to come by these days. In London, there's lots of buses. It's easy for us to get up and running again, to build out, to deploy this infrastructure again. Because of all of the existing BuildKite expertise within the building, I wasn't going to go too much into BuildKite's feature set, but the kind of parallelization and consolidation of artifacts that you can do some really fun things, like you could have one step, build your testable artifact, and then deploy that to 6, 7, 8 other concurrent steps with a different flavor of a simulator environment or a Xcode toolchain. So we do have one project at the moment, which is a SDK, and they're at the same time they're parallel building using Xcode 11 as well as Xcode 12, and that was just one extra step in their pipeline file. And to be able to do that, which was not even possible with our previous setup or with Buddy Build, yeah, has definitely made a few teams happy. I didn't highlight at the beginning, but I'm very keen for lots of questions. So I've got one more slide where I'm going to go through references, but if you've got questions, hit up to Slack and Tups will ask them to me in a second. So references, a lot of the information for doing iOS CI is scattered around all over the place. There's lots of different blogs, there's lots of different Slack channels, but there's not, like, Apple's official documentation doesn't give you any guidance on how to do this. Like, I think a lot of it still references Xcode bots, which, yeah, that was a fun time. So there are a few places that I always keep going back to. Bitrise as a vendor, they are amazing at what they open source. Their open source repo has 100% of their infrastructure for how they build their VM images. And that has got lots of really great nuggets in it for faster ways to accept certain dialogues for certain permissions that you have for certain first-time launches of certain tools. All of these weird things that you hit when you're trying to do this stuff for the first time. And it was recently shared on the CocoaHeads Slack that GitHub have open sourced some, not all, of their macOS stuff. What's really fascinating with the GitHub VM images is that they put all of the versions of Xcode into one VM image. And I was looking at it, they've got 13 different versions of Xcode that they need to install into one VM image. It must take them so long to build that thing. and that happens in a single run. And Mac Stadium, their repo as well, has got lots of really good stuff. I didn't mention Fastlane in this presentation, but Fastlane, the source code, has got lots of great nuggets if you are in this space and you are looking at managing iOS simulators. So yeah, that's the presentation. I'm Pete Goldsmith. I'm very keen for lots of questions. I'm at _Pete Goldsmith on Twitter, and you'll always find me on the CI/CD channel on Slack at CocoaHeads. I've got notifications turned on for that one. So yeah. Tups, you got any questions?
Yep. Thanks, Pete. So it's probably one of the advantages of the current COVID situation is the hit by the bus situation is probably a lot less likely than it was before. But we do have a couple of questions from the Meetup channel, which is great. The first one actually came from Matt Dells, but Matt Coles wanted to know as well. So you got all the Matts wanting to know. Updating the VMs, and I think you covered it a little bit there at the end, for new betas and Xcode versions.
Yep.
What sort of process do you go through for that?
Yep. So to build the VMs, I'm using Ansible as well, because a lot of the tasks that need to run on Metal are the same that happen inside a VM. So I have a playbook which takes these or builds all of these images from scratch and tiers them up if they're not already available. So the question was, what happens when Xcode betas get released? So
yep.
when an Xcode beta gets released, the initial step is currently still manual. Like I run Ansible on the command line. I do some clicky clacky. I run a script, but that then goes and talks to all of the it goes to one machine which builds the VM image, and then it then pulls it down and then deploys it across the rest of the machines. Yeah, if there's anything more specific than that, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, and I assume that you stay pretty much with the latest sort of release of macOS. You're not running into the betas of macOS just to make your life tricky.
Yeah, no. So for macOS, this I didn't really emphasize too much. The shape of everything that we built is very much tailored and suited to REA's sets of problems and benefits that we see. If you were wanting to look after, like if you were building a macOS app and you wanted to try and do this, then you hit another world of problems, because if you want multiple versions of macOS at the same level that we've got multiple versions of Xcode, then yeah, you're in another world of pain. So we use the Metal machines on, I think they're on Catalina, and the VMs are on Catalina as well. Yeah, I never touched the beta versions of the macOS. There's no, because we're not building in our organization, we're not building macOS apps. I'm fortunate that we don't need to solve that problem.
Yeah. Cool. I think we've got a heckler in the crowd. Stu Gletto was asking, did you measure the performance of the improvements compared to hosted CIs?
Measure the performance?
Yeah. Or performance improvements.
Right. So I enjoy racing Bitrise for the time to new Xcode version. They've bet me a few times, but I beat them most often. As far as the build performance versus the hosted vendors, ours is much faster. I don't actually have a concrete metric that I can refer to, but because we are controlling the number of competing virtualization instances on the Metal, and our utilization is not super high, our speeds for our virtualized environments are, I think, 10-15% knocked off of what it would be to run on bare metal. And yeah, some of the other vendors like BuddyBuild or Bitrise. BuddyBuild were no, this is live stream. Previously, I had some challenges with BuddyBuild where it was obvious where lots of jobs were starting to pull up, and you could just tell that when lots of jobs pulled up, all of your builds were getting a lot slower. That it seemed to be that for particular accounts, they would aggregate your builds to the same hardware, and it didn't seem like for all of their customers they were being uniformly distributed across hardware. So yeah.
Cool. Sam Jarman asks, what would be a good way to do sort of the dev staging production environments, and the is that just something that you do in your scripts, or is it do you have specific VMs for it?
So for the dev staging environments, I'm not too sure if that's referring to the dev staging environments of the apps or.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. So the apps is that the teams that make the apps get to choose how they get to roll whatever they want to do for their dev environments. Something that we do have that I didn't cover. One of the benefits that we've been able to unlock, this is another system that the amazing Gina built, is the internal REA app library. And the REA app library, because we've got access to an enterprise account, we get to have enterprise internal builds of all of our apps, which means that we don't have to worry about ad hoc provisioning profiles or device IDs. We've got our own AWS hosted behind a REA security infrastructure app library that our CI can directly deposit its artifacts into, and that means each team can spin up a new app and download it onto their phones very quickly, and that's what we use for our internal testing.
So just a quick one related to that. Baz asks, how do you decide what goes to test flight and or prod?
That's the choice of the team. I'm just here to hold the CI. There are different teams that are pushing each build of master to test flight. There are other teams that manually unlock the pipeline, or only certain release branches are automatically going to test flight once the builds are in test flight. We don't have any teams that are going to levels of automating pushing out to the people yet. It's still my understanding, Stu might be able to correct me, we've still got people going into App Store Connect and clicking the button to do that final push out to the public.
Cool. Well, speaking of Stu, he had another question for you. Good. Would you recommend using this approach in any company, and where would you use it and where not?
Thank you, Stu. Proper intro and outro slides would have been good. So like I was saying before, this is very much an REA shape kind of solution for REA sort of problems. This is way overkill for very small teams. I think anytime, if you've got one team or one app, and at that stage or at that scale, regardless of contributing devs, you can kind of get away with managing, because you've got the one tool chain to look after. You're probably on the side of it's okay to bear the costs of managing Xcode sitting on metal machines and not have to worry about the virtualization problems. But as soon as you're in an organization where you'd like to have multiple apps or consider multiple tool chains, regardless of you going to these lengths, going with a vendor or rolling your own that allows you to choose your Xcode toolchain quickly and promptly, is recommended. GitHub Actions are great. Bitrise is great. For us, like I said, we had so much invested into Build Kite, and where this approach would work somewhere else is, say, you're a company that's super invested into TeamCity, and TeamCity, you could have all of your own same kind of wins if you went with the same approach.
Cool.
Cool.
And I think you might have just answered this one only seconds ago. Bok had a question about how does it compare to insert your opinionated favorite alternative here in terms of CI and those sort of tools.
Yep. So, like I said, I love Bitrise and I'll continually recommend them at certain stages. But Bitrise might not be the sensible choice if you've got internal security compliance issues, like if you're a bank or you're a financial institute, and maybe you need, like, you're by compliance required to look after your own metal, then something like this will work. If you can get away with using a third-party vendor, and maybe you're a small startup and the whole organization being on the same CI is not something that you want to is not something that's super important, and Bitrise is a great option. But GitHub Actions is a contender as well, or something to consider. I had a lot of high hopes for when they launched, but I've seen a few things that have raised a few eyebrows, and as far as their time to new Xcode version hasn't been ideal, and I've witnessed a few times where I've hit retry on a build and I've received a different Xcode version, like in the beta period, and hit retry again and I received a different version of Xcode again. So I think there's a few things that they're still trying to iron out. Anytime that you can go with a vendor that focuses very much, like their entire business model focuses on your problem space or the tool chains that you're using, I always say lean towards that. Like Bitrise focus very much on mobile, and Anchor, if you're doing your own virtualization technology, focuses very much on the macOS problem.
Cool. Mike has a question. Has there been any major upgrade pains along the way, and what tends to need the most care and feeding?
That's a really good question. Upgrade pains. So I've been fortunate that there hasn't been any breaking pains when Dub came along. I was like kind of excited for Xcode 12, but maybe they'd changed the entire command line interface for the first time launch. But I was able to point the initial build the VM script at Xcode 12 and it all just worked. So haven't had issues there. One of the disk space is a problem. That's one of the hardest things to keep an eye on. We've now got metrics and reporting and AWS sitting on all of the Macs to keep an eye on and fire off alerts if disk space is running low. But if I wanted to support, 13 different versions of Xcode, we then have to solve a disk space kind of problem as well, because if we went with the shape of one VM per version of Xcode and one of these VMs is like 60 gig, and we wanted to have 13 of those, a 512 SSD isn't going to cut it. We then have to start asking MaxStadium for their network attached storage appliances, and then we've got some shuffling around the VMs kind of problems. But yeah, so disk space is one of the things that kind of knew we're going to hit it as an issue, but when we hit it, I wasn't expecting to hit it as quickly as I did. So there was some quick things that needed to be looked at.
Cool. Couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. Matt asks, is there any free alternatives to Anchor?
Yep, so I think VirtualBox like VirtualBox is open source and VirtualBox is free. The success rate that you'll have with VirtualBox, I've had lots of failures with it in the past. I don't know what its current status is. Like I was saying before, VirtualBox's kind of primary shtick is not macOS hosts for macOS guests. It does have that compatibility, and you can do that with VirtualBox. And if you just want to toy around with some of this stuff, I'd definitely recommend going down that path. But yeah, there might be other free alternatives as more and more people start to build on top of Apple's hypervisor framework, which is going to become more and more important as Apple Silicon comes about. So other than VirtualBox, I'm not aware of any others.
Yeah, and a nice segue there for you. Mike had a question about what is the plan for Apple Silicon?
No plan at the moment. So Anchor have been internally testing so they've got the dev kits, and they have got internal success with Apple Silicon, Mac OS being guested or virtualized on Apple Silicon. But yeah, I don't have any plans there. If Apple release a quarter of the price and 8 times the speed kind of Mac Mini machine that Mac Stadium offer up, then I'll be jumping on board. But I don't know, every time I read the Xcode release notes, it doesn't look like Apple Silicon machines are yet the kind of build environment you want to be sitting in.
Yeah. And we'll call it the lucky last question. Neil asks about, does the solution allow for local only, and local being either Australian hosted or where you host the devices yourself internally?
Yep. So we could, and when I was building this, my laptop was one of the machines. With Ansible, you can just point the inventory at something else and it will run the entire play and it will become available. Like the way that BuildKite works is that the BuildKite agent advertises itself, it phones home to base. So we can be Australian. Mac Stadium don't offer an Australian data center. So if we wanted to put stuff in Australia, we would need to be looking after the physical machines ourselves. But yeah, there's nothing stopping us from that. And I could have a disaster recovery kind of solution where there's a Mac Mini sitting somewhere in the office that is the, break glass failover machine in case, someone desperately needs to ship to the App Store and use our infrastructure.
Cool. Well, Thank you very much, Pete. And
no worries.
I think there's a couple more questions in the meetup Slack there, but there's also quite a few people chiming in with their own opinions as well. So I'm sure that discussion has gone for a little bit longer.
Cheers, guys.
So I'm not sure, Rob. Pardon? Good. So thanks, Pete, for that. And thank you all for coming along to this CocoaHeads. There's many ways to connect to us. The easiest is just to go to the melbournecocoaheads.com page. Great work by everyone involved in updating that page. Got all of our info up to date now. And of course, you'll find most of the community in our Slack channel. Our next event is the CocoaHeads Hack Night. We're going to try again doing it via Discord. We had a couple of interesting quick little presentations from people showing off their work. Discord gives you the ability to jump into another channel with some people and just work on things, one-on-one or just a couple of people. Catch up with us on the 21st of October. It goes from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. and the details will be again on either Meetup or Slack. And a quick reminder that if you're interested in just a chat about things and everything that's going on, there's Drinks Night on the 27th of October as well. And finally, the next event for Melbourne CocoaHeads will be Melbourne CocoaHeads number 142. It'll be on the 12th of November, second Thursday as always. I'd like to thank you all very much. Big thanks to Matt and Pete for their presentations tonight, and Rob, as always, pressing the buttons behind the scenes. Big thanks to him as well. If you'd like to join us in our Zoom meetup, have a bit of a chat with everyone, the link will be posted in the meetup channel. So thanks everyone, and see you in that meetup channel.